Okay, we're live. This is the LP Vice Presidential Forum presented by the Mises Caucus. You see, we have three guests here who are running for that office. But first, I'll introduce myself. My name's Aaron. I'm the marketing director and the host of our podcast, Decentralized Revolution. And helping me out on the broadcast is going to be Connor Nepomuceno. He's going to be watching your comments and trying to find the best audience format of prepared questions. Then we're going to have candidate to candidate questions, and then some audience questions at the end. And we're calling this a forum rather than a debate, just because, as I said, I was talking to the guys before we came on that I like that the vice presidential race has kind of a different energy than the chair race or the presidential race, and it's we have a unique situation in the Libertarian Party where we can have separate candidates run for this. I just think that's interesting. And so this is a forum where we're not going to not everybody is going to answer the question in exactly the same amount of time. We're going to throw a topic out there, discuss it for a few minutes, and then move on. And I think everybody, the spirit of it, don't filibuster, try to be concise and make sure the other two participants get the ball too. So we'll go, I'll go in alphabetical order and to do our 5-minute introductions of our candidates. And the candidates are Ken Armstrong, Spike Cohen, Larry Sharpe. Welcome to you guys.
Thank you.
And go ahead, Ken. Why don't you introduce yourself and kick this off?
Well, it's hello, everybody, and thank you guys for doing this. I think this is a great opportunity. I feel a little self-conscious here because, I'm here with two great guys, two heavy hitters. Obviously, I'm here because I'm the better looking of the three, but
yes,
but we have to somehow contrast ourselves. So I would ask people, if you were back in the days of Lewis and Clark, the fur trading days, and you were going to travel across the country, would you have somebody guide you across the country who had theories about it and read a book, or would you have somebody guide you across the country who had actually been on the route and knew what the route looked like? And that's kind of what I bring to the table. As many of you know, I'm a former military officer, and I fully understand there's some people that just punched the no column for me because of that, and I get that. But nobody hates fire more than firefighters, and a good military officer hates war more than he hates anything else. And I know where the abuses are in the federal system. I was a NATO officer. I understand what the purpose of NATO was and why it's outlived that purpose. There are a lot of things in my career as a U.S. consul representative to the Pelagi Islands and understanding international relations, working as the director of Habitat for Humanity in Hawaii and on a local county elected office, working as a newspaper columnist and talking with the public that way. A number of things that I've done that have sort of paved the way for this job that we're doing now. So the big question is, what is the Vice President of the United States and what does he really do? The main job of the Vice President is to sit around and wait in case the president dies. That's really his main job. But there are constitutional duties for the Vice President. And the most important one in my book right now is to be the presiding officer of the Senate. It hasn't been used very much by vice presidents. I don't know if it's because they're lazy or wanted to kick the ball over to the other side of the field or what it is. But Thomas Jefferson took big advantage of being the president of the Senate. He presided over the deliberations of the Senate. And I think we're at a place in our country where having a libertarian sit presiding, he can only vote in the case of a tie, but he can preside over the deliberations and he can share the deliberations with the American people and make sure they're involved with what's going on. And that's my view of what the vice president is supposed to be about, is shining a bright light on what's going on in government so the American people can really be involved.
Great. Thanks, Ken. You had a couple minutes left there, so we appreciate brevity, so we won't run long, hopefully. Spike Cohen, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Hey, everybody. I am Spike Cohen. For those who don't know me, I am a business owner who started a web design company as a teenager. I sold that company just over 3 years ago to focus my life on my real passion, which is spreading the message of self-ownership, property rights, non-aggression, voluntary solutions over coercive ones, the libertarian message to a public that often has never heard of such things. Late last year, I decided to run for the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nomination because I believe that we need presidential and vice presidential candidates who understand the need to change the culture and change the conversation. I learned that as being the owner of the co-owner of Muddy Waters Media, the host of My Fellow Americans, and the co-host of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, and hosting 2 live libertarian programs every week that have primarily been outreach to non-libertarian circles, and seeing the response that we get back and seeing what the conversation is in the greater culture. Folks, right now, the vast majority of Americans, really the vast majority of people around the world, are only hearing arguments over how much more the government should grow, how much more it should cost, how much more involved in our lives it should be. We see this every day. Arguments over how much of our lives are essential versus non-essential, how much more government should be taking from us, how much more involved government should be in our health and our well-being, and so on. We must work, and we are working, to change that conversation. To that end, as part of my campaign, I've been going to college campuses, housing projects, small businesses, neighborhoods of all different income levels, helping to start and grow local and campus LP affiliates, as well as continuing to host my shows every week and appearing on both libertarian and non-libertarian shows, podcasts, and media interviews, taking human action to spread our message to as wide and broad an audience as possible. The Libertarian Statement of Principles says that we seek to challenge the cult of the omnipotent state, the idea that government is good and necessary, that the government simply needs to tax and spend differently, or just needs to be operated by the right people and everything will be fine. As libertarians, we explicitly reject all of these ideas. Let's be very clear here. All taxation is theft. All taxing and spending plans are not libertarian, and not only would they not solve any problem, they'd make things worse. I'm running for 2 things: to make the Libertarian Party libertarian again, and to subvert the Republicrats and their government-sponsored media machine to do our bidding for once, so that we can actually seek freedom in our time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Spike. Larry, you're up.
Hey, guys, you all know who I am. Let's get to the questions.
Okay, great. The first question, we want to kind of just get everybody on the record on this question. Would you agree to serve as the vice presidential candidate for the LP no matter who wins the presidential nomination? We'll go backwards this time. Larry, Spike, and then Ken.
My number one issue is, will we have someone who I believe can do 2 things? One, if lightning actually strikes, that person will be able to, and the Congress will vote that person into office, right? If lightning actually strikes and we actually win 1, 2, or 3 states, that actually happens, and this gets thrown into the Senate, into the Congress, is it someone who they would actually vote for? Number one, if that's true. And second, if the person who's nominated is someone who I think will have enough money behind them, enough people behind them, the party behind them to make impact, then yes, I would, regardless of who that person is. Yes, I would.
Okay, great. Spike.
Yes, if I am nominated, I will humbly serve. And whether I'm nominated or not, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be going around the country helping to grow local and campus and state affiliates and spread a principled and consistent message of libertarianism. And if that's as the VP candidate, then yes, absolutely.
Great. All right, Ken.
Well, no matter who the party nominates, they've got my vote. Now, the question whether I would run with them as their running mate, that depends on whether I really felt like I could round out their ticket and that we had a compatible enough message that it wouldn't cause conflict to have me go out in one direction and have them go out in the other. So, you know, there are certainly candidates out there who probably wouldn't be interested in having me as a running mate. And there are candidates out there who I wouldn't round out well. So I would say to that question, no, not really.
Okay. The first big question that we're going to discuss for 10 minutes total is this. How would you describe the LP vice presidential nominee's role during a campaign, and what qualifies you to fill that role? And we'll start with Spike this time.
Sure. So I think the goal of being the vice presidential nominee, it's a similar one to the presidential nominee, right? Our goal here is to spread the message. The larger American culture is not in tune right now with the libertarian message, even though even though the average American innately understands that something is wrong. They're constantly bombarded with government and corporate media propaganda that everything's fine. Just do what we say, just obey, just stay, and just do what we tell you to do, and everything will turn out. And we know emphatically that that's not true. We're living in a dystopia that was created because government completely botched the ability to contain a pandemic. So we know that not to be true. And so our goal is to spread that message. And there's also obviously the goal of helping to earn as many votes for ourselves as the president, vice president, and for down ballot candidates who have the highest chance of winning than compared to a nationwide federal election. So in terms of what makes me qualified, I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been going around and spreading the message of liberty. And I've been doing it outside of libertarian circles. When I got involved with Muddy Waters Media, when I sold my company, I realized that we've done a great job of libertarians talking to libertarians about libertarianism. And that's great. And it's good for iron to sharpen iron, especially as we bring people in. We want to make sure that they're consistent with our message and our platform. But ultimately, we also need to be reaching the other 97+% of the country. And in doing so, we need to present a message that is going to get around the filters of government and corporate media and subvert their process, and B, engage them, lower their cognitive defenses so they actually listen to what we have to say, and using their precepts and their concerns, argue the message, the libertarian message. You own yourself, you own your life, you own your body, you own your labor, you own your property, and we'll stand with you against anyone who would take that from you.
Great. Who wants to jump in on that?
I think he's 100% correct. I love what Spike said. He's right. He's on the money. Absolutely. And this is why I'm glad this is a forum, because what I think some people don't understand clearly, and it's the way the party has been pushing it. The vice president is support staff. That's what the vice president is support staff. Right? I'm not running to be president. I'm running to be support staff of our nominee. That's what I'm running for. That's Spike is correct. We're going to help that person move the message forward. That's our job, right? Our job, if Spike or I are the VP, Ken's the VP, our job isn't to be the cool guy. Our job is to show up during the campaign when he or she cannot show up. We sit in their shoes and we pitch their message. That is actually our job. That's what we're actually doing this for. What qualifies me? I've been doing it for 4 years. That's what qualifies me. Did it for Gary Johnson in 2016. Did it for our candidate for governor of New York in 2014. Did it for several candidates in New York State. That's why I got 103 victories in my state. I'm the support guy. I literally have 4 of them on my show every single week, supporting local candidates. It's what I do. I help them spread their message. I would say I'm the only guy here who's raised $750,000 for big L candidates. That's right. $500,000 was for me, but $250,000 was for other candidates. I've raised money for 10 other libertarian candidates that aren't me. I've raised money for 20 different state affiliates, some multiple times. And this is what I've done. So if you're asking what qualifies me to do this, if that's the question, because I've been doing it for 4 years. And to Spike's credit, he's been doing it too. I know Ken is an amazing guy and would do it and be out there with me if I begged him to. I'm sure he would. He'd be right next to me doing it also. So we do it. So I think that's what qualifies me, is that I've been doing it and supporting other candidates. I realize that that the presidential candidacy, I realize, is not the Sharpe show. There is a Sharpe show. It's called The Sharpe Way. You should watch it. It's awesome. That's the Sharpe show, right? But the presidential candidacy is not my show. It is the candidate show. I support them. I was the one on TV for Gary Johnson saying what the governor meant was I was the one trying to make that happen, and that will be our job.
Did you know where Aleppo was, Larry?
I did, and the thing I have asked that question too, and this isn't a perfect example of this. I'm glad you brought that up. People tease me all the time and say things like, well, what's Aleppo? And I say, I'll tell you what Aleppo is. It was an excuse that you used to vote for somebody who wasn't going to be good. That's what it was, an excuse that you used to put the same two people right back into power. That's what Aleppo is. It was an excuse that you used to not actually put a good man into office, someone who was honest enough to say, I don't know, versus someone who lied to your face. What it was, Aleppo was an excuse.
And even the person who asked Gary that question said his answer was pretty good. He said,
yeah, his follow-up was good. Yeah.
What Gary said was, okay, remind me what we're talking about here. And he, I hate this notion that politicians have to know everything about everything. That's how we get somebody like Trump in the White House who thinks he knows everything about everything. We've got to have people who are humble enough to say, I surround myself with people smarter than I am. So, to answer your question about the VP, one of the roles of the VP candidate is to not screw this thing up for the presidential candidate. It's to be on message, to understand the principles of the party, to be compatible enough, but a little bit of a contrast to the nominee, so that you can show that the party isn't all just monochrome. So it's a job mainly of don't be the guy who screws this up for the top of the ticket.
Yeah, probably the number one thing that we can do is not vouch for one of the other people running. That would probably be number one. Do not say that people should vote for someone other than the Libertarian.
I will promise
ticket.
to
That would
not
probably be
vouch for
the
Hillary
number
Clinton
one
right now.
Yeah, same. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, anyone who isn't a libertarian, I won't. I assume Ken also the same. This Aleppo was a perfect example of what I'm talking about, the filter and the trap that media sets up for us. So they tell us every single election cycle, we are Charlie Brown and they are Lucy with the football, right? They say, if you do things the way that we tell you to do it, then you run up here and we'll let you kick the football. You'll have a place at the table, a seat at the table, and you'll be able to run the same way we run the Democrats and Republicans. And every year we go, okay, here I come. And we go to kick the ball. They take the ball out from under us, and we end up landing on our feet. I hope the younger people watching understand that reference. But if there are,
but this time it'll work, Spike.
This time it's going to work, and that's why
this time, right?
This time they're absolutely going to do it. And what we need to do is be subverting the media. We need to give the media something that they can't look away from, and that their profit motive of ad revenue can't look away from.
Yes.
And then when we leverage that, get their eyes on us, and then we can actually give the libertarian message. And that is crucial to do it. When you ask what makes me qualified, if we're talking the role of vice president as it stands right now, no one is qualified to have that kind of power or access to that kind of power, that centralization of power under the government. No one should have that. And we all agree on this. That's the kind of message we need to be spreading. We need to take control of the media to do it.
Great.
And we need to not be shy about that. We need to stare people square in the eye and say, you have been sold a bill of goods for so long, you're believing it's true now.
Yep, exactly.
But not this election, Ken. This election's too important.
It's the most important election
this
of our lives.
election's too important.
This one, we got to reelect Trump, because otherwise Biden might win.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, my God.
It's amazing.
If I may interject,
Sure.
Gary might have fumbled Aleppo a little bit on the spot there, but he didn't tell people to drink bleach, and he can form complete sentences.
That's correct. He didn't sniff any children.
No, he's sniffing any hair, yeah, that we know of.
And no scandals. He didn't rape anybody. He's not a rapist. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
We'll go on to the next topic, and it's a little more detailed. What are the top 2 or 3 most important issues that you would talk about out on the campaign trail, and why? And we'll start with Larry on that.
Whatever the number one pieces are for the president. I mean, that's really the issue. My number one issues are irrelevant. I don't care what my issues are. I need to be able to push the message that our presidential candidate is talking about, right? I don't want to dodge what they're saying, right? When it comes to Jim Gray, I know obviously Jim Gray is my favorite candidate. deficit is a big deal for him. He wants to talk about the deficit and how to deal with that deficit. He's got a grandson that he's concerned about that matters. He wants to end the drug war. He was a judge. He watched the people getting destroyed in the drug war. These are his two big issues. So I would push his big issues, plus, depending upon whatever audience I was in front of. When I ran for governor in New York State's a very diverse state, and I would literally change my priorities on what I would talk about depending upon what county I was in. Right? If I'm in a farmland county, I'm going to focus more on farming issues. I'm in New York City, I'm going to deal more with schooling. So I'm going to deal with the issues that the people care about, plus the president's issues. I know what Judge Gray's issues are. And if I'm supporting another candidate, whatever that candidate's number one issues are, plus my audience. That's what I push, but I focus on one very important thing: the benefits that these policies or issues can bring to them. That is the critical piece. If I do that well, we get votes.
Good. Who else would like to jump in on that?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I, in addition to what Larry said, because, Larry's always right. What can you say? In addition to that,
I wish my wife would think that.
Yeah. We'll talk about that one of these days, Larry. But I think there's two things that we need to do as the vice presidential candidate. One is we need to be out there listening for the presidential candidate. We need to be out there tapping the angst, finding out where the public opinion is, what are the issues that people are really concerned about, rather than just carrying a message out. I'm an old white guy. If I go into an African American community, the last thing they're going to want to hear is that I'm there to save them. They want to know that I hear what their problems are, and I need to be able to do that honestly and effectively. And the other thing that we need to do very effectively everywhere we go is support the down ballot candidates. We need to get people elected. We've got one member of Congress now, and he's going to be gone in 6 months. We need to get some more.
Yeah, that's something I've learned going to, as I said before, going to college campuses, housing projects, communities of all various incomes. The conversations in those areas are so completely different, and the day-to-day concerns that people in those different groups care about the most are wildly different. So for me to go in and say, my top three things are X, Y, and Z, and they go, yeah, I don't care about that at all. Like if I go to a college campus and start talking about ending the wars, a lot of those kids have never had an experience of us not in perpetual war. So very often, unless they've lost a loved one or unless they come from a country that's affected by it, yeah, they're against the wars and they might want them to end, but that's not a pressing concern. For them, a pressing concern, for example, is student debt. And so I found in talking to them, I would ask them about, how much they would rather have a system of being able to just apprentice or intern directly under people that are in their chosen field of work until they reached a standard that the people in that chosen field of work decided that they could work too, so that they didn't have to go to college or university for 4 to 8 years, run up tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt, and probably get to work within a year or two instead of 4 to 8 years. And they all said, yeah, that sounds great, but I can't. And I'd say, but why? And they'd say, well, because I have to get this degree and I have to get my license. And I'd say, but why? And they'd say, because the government says I have to. And I'd say,
well, because my mom told me.
Well, because but why did their mother tell them? Because the system is set up that way, because a bunch of central planners arbitrarily decided that in order to be able to do this specific line of work, you had to go through all of these different steps in order to do so. It had nothing to do with any kind of market-derived need.
But it's also the culture piece you brought up, Spike. You brought the culture piece up, and I'm giving you credit here. This is exactly right. It isn't just that. It is that, but it's also there's a culture that says, if I don't go to college, I'm stupid. If I don't go to college, I can't be successful. I think it's culture too.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so you have to reach people from what their precepts are. And using, anyone who's been in sales can tell you, your precepts matter. What the person you're talking to cares about matter. You have to demonstrate that you give a damn what their concern is. You have to present yourself as someone that they can trust, and then you can give them the solution once you've demonstrated that. And it's very simple. But if you just go out and say, hey, the most important thing right now is taxes and spending and healthcare, and they go, I don't care about any of those three things because they don't affect me, then you've already lost them before you started. So the most important thing is to craft it around the specific audiences that you're dealing with in the given time.
You know, an example of that, I met a lady in Cincinnati and her issue for me when I was running for president, her issue for me was, I've got a special needs child and I can't get school buses for him in my district. And my first thought was, lady, I'm running for president, not school board. But, you know, I thought about it for a minute. I listened to her and I thought about it for a minute. And I said, you know, part of the problem that you have is the Department of Education has too much control over your local school board, and unfunded mandates are choking out your school district, so they can't afford to provide you the services you need. So that's an example of exactly what you're saying, Spike. We need to be listening.
Yep, exactly. If we're not going with what people care about, and again, people meaning individual people.
Yes.
I mean, you know, we as libertarians believe in the individual and what the individual's concern is. I mean, that's one of the basic precepts of Austrian economics, is that individuals make choices. So we need to respect that individuals making choices, and groups of individuals together who are in similar situations making those choices and having those concerns. We need to base our campaigning off of what that specific thing is. For housing projects, surprisingly, one of the biggest things in housing projects, whether they were saying this or not, was occupational licensing. Every single person I spoke to in these housing projects had a side hustle, and they weren't licensed and they weren't paying taxes, and they were doing it as a barter, or they'd pay money for it. Every single one of them had a side hustle, and every single one of them
in general.
Yeah.
The gig economy in general.
The gig economy in general, yeah. And every single one of them were watching out for the police for each other, to where it was like a mesh network of defense where they would call each other if the police came through. They did not see the police as protection. They saw the police as what they were, a hindrance to them getting ahead in life. And so when I would talk to them about occupational force, it was an occupying force. And so what I would talk to them about is ending occupational licensing. That was a huge hit. That was actually a bigger hit than ending the war on drugs, which was also a big hit there. So you have to listen to what they have to say, and being solid in our principles and honest about our principles, present a solution, a libertarian solution for them.
Well, the war on drugs, if you look at it at its core, there are obviously many reasons why people hate it, but one of the pieces that links with what you're saying, the war on drugs winds up becoming a war on brown and black entrepreneurs.
Correct.
That's what it winds up becoming, right? By default, right? So these are people who are still trying to push through this entrepreneurial spirit that most brown, black, and immigrants communities have in them. We literally have people with guns trying to stop them from being their own business owners, and we're locking them up and putting them in jail, and they are still doing this. It hasn't stopped to a point where some of you may know there's actually a couple of nonprofits that actually take people who are nonviolent criminals with drug charges and then helps them to become entrepreneurs. They literally retrain these guys. They say, well, you know what? You know how to run a business just with guns. Let's take the guns out and let's have you actually run a business. And then there are guys from Wall Street literally funding these businesses. And
the Homeboy Network.
Yes, definitely. Exactly right, Ken.
Yep. And if sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one thing that is going to come up in this campaign, like it or not, is the government's response to COVID-19, the economic shutdowns. So let's spend a couple of minutes on that. And Spike, since I cut you off, I'll let you take that one.
That's okay. I started talking before you. So let's talk about what got us here with COVID-19, because there's some misidentification of the problem here. Some people say the problem is that people are grouping together too much, and that's why the pandemic started. Let's be clear about how the pandemic even spread in the first place. After the Chinese government tried to pretend it didn't exist until it had reached a point of being a pandemic, it went all around the world, including here. Now let's talk about what happened once it got here. The CDC had rules in place, rules that technically are still in place, but they've kind of changed them somewhat, that said in order to test for any new virus, you had to go through this Byzantine process of getting an approval for an application to test for it. And that application process took between 4 and 6 months. Now, for a virus that spreads as fast as this one appears to, that would mean we'd all have it by then, before they could actually start testing anyone. Thankfully, we had practitioners who were willing to break the law. So we had a Dr. Helen Chu at the University of Washington in Seattle, and other doctors in California, Texas, Chicago, and I believe Boston, who they had patients who came in, said, I'm sick. I was in Wuhan, China, or nearby that area. I've come back from there. I have symptoms that are synonymous with COVID-19. I don't feel well. And out of an abundance of caution, I'd like to be tested for it. And so apparently these tests are not all that difficult to create. They created the tests in-house. They tested these patients, and some of them came back positive. So they went to the CDC and said, listen, we've been testing people and they're coming back positive. The CDC's initial response to that was to say, okay, fine, destroy all of those tests, including the positive results, and tell no one, including the patients, and don't ever tell anyone again or test anyone again without getting the approval. Thankfully, they broke the law again, putting their Hippocratic oath above that of the magic sheet of paper from the CDC that said to do it this way, and they released it to the public. And that's a perfect example of civil disobedience, actually forcing the state to, in this case, the CDC now says you still have to apply for it, but you can start testing in the meantime until you get approved. But that put us 6 to 8 weeks behind in a precious period of time where it could have been contained. And now, as a result, you have all of the states overcorrecting now by telling us we have to stay in our houses unless we go to a grocery store. And of course, we have to only go to that grocery store during a certain period of time. That way, we're all there at the same time, for our safety. And we can't meet out in parks or in places in public of groups of, in South Carolina, 3 or more, or the police are going to come and get really close to you, well within 6 feet, and they're going to arrest you and put you in a cage with a bunch of other people where you're most likely to get COVID-19. Now let's talk about what that is.
In New York, they won't do that. They'll just charge you $500.
They'll just charge you $500. Here they'll arrest you. Yeah, it's way better to get charged.
You can't sit alone on a beach in Hawaii, where, by the way, sunlight and warm air is supposed to kill the virus. You sit alone on a beach in Hawaii, it's matching bracelets.
Sunlight and salt water, saline.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So instead of that, they're going to put you in a cage where you're almost assured to get COVID-19. Then let's talk about what the threat is here, because they'll never say it. But the state is saying, if you don't obey us, we will infect you.
Yes. We will end your life.
We will potentially cause you to die, or at the very least get exposed to something that you may have been trying to avoid as a result of you not obeying us.
Because the system is more important than your life.
Exactly. The system is more important than the problem.
100%.
The libertarian solution to that is to take the boot off of the neck of the market. Take the boot off the neck of the healthcare providers to try to contain this. Take the boot off the neck of people who are trying to produce protective equipment for healthcare workers. Take the boot off of the neck of healthcare workers who want to work across state or national lines so that they can go where they're the most needed. Take the boot off of the neck of hospitals who need certificate of need laws, but they basically beg municipalities to allow them to create a hospital in an area.
This is all the stuff that we've been talking about as libertarians for literally years. And what I love is everyone I hear is, so you know what, there's no libertarians in a pandemic, or this proves the free market doesn't work. Yeah. I hear that garbage all the time. And the second I hear that, I say there are 6 things that went wrong. 6: masks, see if I get them right, ventilators, tests, hand sanitizers, doctors, and beds. All 6 screwed up because of the government, without question.
Correct.
If you are a governor or if you are a president, all you have to do is, you don't have to have any other knowledge. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room at all. In fact, it's better if you aren't the smartest guy in the room. All you know is, wait a minute, this disease has crossed a border. Okay, now it's no longer local, right? It's in South Korea or any spot. At that point,
right,
a good leader doesn't do this. This is what a good leader does not do. All right, guys, be quiet. I got this. That's not a good leader. A good leader says, Ken, I need you. Spike, I need you. Aaron, I need you. Connor, get up. Let's go. Yep. It's this way, guys. Let's get moving. That's what a good leader does. And the first thing everybody should have said is, all those Department of Building regs that don't allow local people to actually, Ken gets it. Yep. End them right now so I can actually I can put cots in the basements of VFWs, the Knights of Columbus, local churches. So that now, because I have people at home now, because what's happening, I found this out in Sweden, people can't afford to keep their old people in their life in the facilities anymore. So they're bringing their elderly home. Well, great. Keep your elderly home, but then you can work and then you sleep in the cot in the basement of the church. So you don't bring it home to your family. But that's against the rules right now. Not just that, you get rid of all the distillery laws. Distilling. So why? So you can make hand sanitizer. Yep. Then, of course, you let the people make hand sanitizer. Their
distilleries,
Yep.
Yes, exactly. And then you also say, off the bat, you say, you know what? Any sales tax for hand sanitizer? Gone. Otherwise, you have to apply for that. And I'm going to use your word, Spike, the Byzantine way of trying to apply for your license. Amazing. Get rid of that. Now nonprofits can actually make money selling hand sanitizer. Yep. And then Let government be what our culture allows it to be and it's good at, which is a centralized hub for information. Let it be the 911 or the 311, right? Allow the FDA and CDC to provide the local governments with, here's what we believe is right. Now local people can take that information and use it to the best of their ability. But Larry, that can't work. That's what's happening in Sweden literally today. Exactly that. We were talking about this years ago. I was talking about it 2 or 3 months ago, saying do this, and the local communities would begin with early adopters. And Spike, you know all about early adopters. Early adopters begin to try these things out. Some of it won't work, but those failed tests would have happened 3 months ago. We'd have the right tests right now. Everyone else would start copying. We'd have an infrastructure ready. We'd have cool Yankee masks and all kind of cool stuff. Now, and the last piece is why you know what I'm talking about, right? We have those cool masks.
NY,
Absolutely. Last piece is you tell your attorneys general to not prosecute anybody who breaks the law when it comes to 3D printing. And you immediately say, go ahead, make masks, make ventilators, make tests.
Yep.
And if that would have happened by now, we would be rocking and rolling. We'd be as good as Sweden is right now. Sweden has shut down nothing. But voluntarily, the people have stayed home. They've done social distancing, and their economy has not crashed at all. That's what we'd be right now.
Ken,
so,
go ahead.
The one thing you mentioned there, Larry, and in all of my training with government and disaster response and everything I've done, the number one most important thing is know your enemy, know what you're up against, know what the problem is. And I'm convinced right now if there was an earthquake in Los Angeles.
Hey, hold on. Hey, you Twins fans. No, Yankees number one.
I knew you.
We rule the world,
that.
goddammit. I'm from the Bronx. We rule the world.
That was the comment I was trying to put up on the screen, and
We rule the world.
someone posted another comment and bumped
27 World Series championships. Eat that, Minnesota.
Yeah,
Eat that.
No Yankees filibuster. Ken, why don't you put a bow on COVID-19? That's okay.
So I was going to say that, with everything that's said and done, and our big screw up is not getting information to the people so that they could make their own decisions and live their own lives. But I guarantee you, if there was an earthquake in Los Angeles right now, Trump would find a way to blame it on the Chinese. And right now, the big game is going to be, how do we blame this on the Chinese?
Yeah.
What we need to do as a world, as a culture, as a people, is we need to get past the blame game. The Chinese are not going to cop to their responsibility for this because they know it's going to be costly for them. But if we would get out of the mode of blame and work with them to find solutions to, how do we avoid this thing happening in the future? Look, we're not going to cut trade. We're not going to increase tariffs. We just want to know what happened and how do we avoid it in the future. But right now, the tone of government is, we got to have a bad guy. We got to blame him. We got to make him pay. And that is not good for the world.
Because it's a political consideration. It has nothing to do with an actual solution. As libertarians, we believe in the spontaneous order of the market, the ability of individual free people working in concert with one another to solve the solutions that they have. Conversely, we also believe in the brittle nature of centrally planned solutions. And we're watching that play out in real time. And we're the biggest victims of it, because that's what happens with centrally planned economies and markets and centrally planned systems, because they made sure they have as many resources as they need. And the rest of us are told to stay inside, don't go anywhere, don't do anything, and just, eat what you can and go to the grocery store at the same time and don't go anywhere else. And we promise everything will be fine, even though we're the reason this happened in the first place. Yeah. And this is so easy.
It's Stockholm syndrome.
It is Stockholm syndrome. And when people say,
and it's nothing but it's an excuse for advancing central planning.
That's exactly what it is.
To the next level in our country.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, let's we have one more question that we prepared in advance, and we're going to do the candidate to candidate questions and then the audience questions. So we've got 5 or 6 of those audience questions stacked up that Connor has selected so far, but please keep submitting those. This last question is kind of a little bit related to the anecdote Ken had about the lady with asking a presidential candidate at the time about busing for a disabled child, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And in American politics, everything is like that the president has to have a an opinion, or a candidate is asked about all these local things. How would you talk about that issue? Should libertarians be trying to find a libertarian solution at the federal level and try to influence what the Congress, the Supreme Court, the president does more? Or should we be focusing more on decentralization, encouraging things like state and local nullification of bad laws, things like that? So how would you handle it if somebody came at you with a question like that, and discuss the difference between going after federal solutions versus decentralized ones? And we'll start with Ken.
Well, first of all, I would do exactly that. I would say, there is a difference, and the federal government shouldn't be imposing its will on you locally. And, we're all libertarians. We all agree with that anyway. But I think beyond that, I would love to just take my phone out. If it's somebody asking me about something in Ohio, I take out my phone and I call my friend Oscar Herrera, who's running for state legislature, and I say, Oscar, you're in touch with the local issue here, this local issue. Let's talk to this woman right here and now. Let's get the local answer. And by doing that, we emphasize the importance of the down ballot candidates. We emphasize the fact that federal government isn't even supposed to have all the answers. That's not even what we're about. And that we keep things at the level they're supposed to be at.
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem, as libertarians, we believe that the ideal solution is to decentralize, ideally all the way down to the individual, who can then work in free association with other individuals as needed, which will be most of the time. That'll be how solutions will be made, is by the market taking spontaneous action. The problem is, on a cultural level, when I go and say I'm running for vice president, like Ken said, they're going to ask local questions because we've been conditioned to believe that everything, all ideas trickle from the font of knowledge that is the White House and the Congress and the Supreme Court, and is trickles down essentially down upon us, the poor detritus of society, waiting to hear the great proclamation that comes from on high, the shining city on a hill. And we know that's nonsense. And the problem is you have to disabuse people of that. The easiest way to do it is to simply give them an opportunity through some Socratic reasoning and through the Socratic method, like I was talking about with the college thing, to let them see that, no, not only is that not the case, but they're often the source of either the foundation of that problem or the making of that problem worse. And that all solutions are going to come at a local level. Now, I'm an anarchist, and I would say a good number of libertarians are also anarchists, but at the very least, it needs to be decentralized. And a perfect example, like he was saying, Oscar Herrera, Kevin Kahn, Anthony Welty, Erica, I know her last name, in West Virginia, all of these people who are running at the state and regional and local level. Like Ken said, great opportunity for down ballot, and also a great opportunity to disabuse the public of the notion that I should be vice control, the vice person in line to control their life, and that those decisions ideally should be made by them. And if there's going to be any government involvement, it needs to be to someone whose house they can visit to talk about it, not someone who is behind a massive secret service, paramilitary force that they'll never hope to ever actually meet.
But when you meet people like that who ask that question, I think as a general rule, and this is what I found when I crossed New York State, you want to try to give them a solution that they can figure out with you right then and there, if you can. And you're doing that, if at all possible, depending upon the time you have and how many people are in line, whatever the case may be. But you're doing it if you can, so that others can hear your train of thought also, right? So if I've got 5 or 10 people in line and one guy or gal says, hey, Larry, I've got this local problem with the speed limit in my town, or with the speed traps in my town.
Right. I'm
running for the vice president. I'm not going to deal with their speed traps, right? Nothing. But can I start to talk to them about, well, is this about law enforcement as a profit center? Is this really about safety or not? Are you concerned about safety? Is that really what you're concerned about? And she goes, well, I am concerned about safety. Okay. Would it be better if there was a police officer sitting there instead that would slow people down? Would a speed bump be better? Is that the kind of thing you'd like better? Oh, I might. Have you talked to your local person? I haven't. What's the actual goal? And as I start talking about that, then the people who are behind go, oh, yeah, that's right. We just accept that we have to have speed limit signs. But we don't. We can simply say there is no safety issue because we haven't had a speed change in 30 years. They just put it up and now they're collecting cash. Oh, it's not safety. So now it's law enforcement as a profit center. Or
Exactly.
no, we've had accidents and we do care about a community and we like a speed bump there so we can, instead not collect money, but actually have our cars go slower. Any of those types of things, when they see that your thought process isn't, I'll pass a law. If your thought process isn't that, and you empower them, they begin to rethink government and they begin to empower themselves. And that's the localization that you're talking about, Spike.
Yep, exactly.
Just reminding me that Article 6, Clause 3, this is how nerdy I can get for you, of the Constitution, says that the vice president, his really, aside from being president of the Senate, his only other job that's described is to support the Constitution. And that can sound really statist to a lot of people who think that way, but the Constitution itself is anti-statist. And so what we're doing when we support the Constitution is we're supporting driving the power back to the people where it belongs. And that's, all politics are local. And the best thing a vice president can do is remind the public that you shouldn't be looking at that Oval Office as the cathedral for all political wisdom.
Yeah, I think to whatever extent the Constitution affirms the rights of the individual, we should agree with it. I again, as an anarchist, I can have a nice side discussion with Ken about Article 1 and how anti-status it is. But regardless of that, ultimately, we're all here. Similar goal. We're trying to go in the other direction. We are moving like a locomotive in the direction of more and more control by government. Government
100%.
growing in size, scope, cost, and power, and control over our day-to-day lives. And we are seeing that right now in a very real way that I think, unless you were already in a marginalized community, you may not have felt it quite as hard as you're feeling it now.
Yep.
Just how quickly it can turn like that. And so this is, in my mind, a perfect opportunity for us to talk to them about what if you didn't have these overlords telling you how to live your life, even though they're doing so in reaction to their utter failure to be able to protect you.
The sad part is I think so many of them are again, have Stockholm syndrome. I look at my own state, right? New York. Right now, if everyone's paying attention, if you are, my governor is on TV just about every single day telling us how he's saving us and while he destroys us. And while he does this every single day, how he's destroying us, because he's saving us or whatever it is, right? That type of thing. He has an 80% approval rate in my state. And he's a Democrat. So you would think Republicans would, not like him. 65% positive rate for Republicans in my state. Yeah. They cannot wait to kiss the feet of their overlord. We have a lot of work to do, a lot.
Right. And the sad thing is there's not one piece of empirical data that proves that the lockdown has done us any good at all. There's a lot of speculation about it, but not one piece of data to prove that the lockdown has actually done us good. Hand washing, sure. Things like that, sure. But nothing that proves that the lockdown has helped us.
Yep. All right, now let's go on to the candidate topic suggestions, and each candidate can bring up two topics or ask two questions, and we're going to do 4-minute discussions on each one of these. I know that's a little complicated, but I think we can handle it. Spike, why don't you give us your first topic or question?
Sure, let me pull up my little handy dandy question thing here. I'm going to start alphabetically with Ken. I had a little bit of a question about president website, but the policies that you would like to have are roughly still the same, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously we're going to support whoever the nominee is for president.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. No, and I just wanted to make sure in case this was an outdated thing or whatever. But so on your website, you talk about your national sales tax plan, and you talk about how the tax would be on non-essential consumption. That triggered me slightly because we are in a situation right now where government is deciding, often very haphazardly and in a very arbitrary way, what is essential versus non-essential. Can you explain to us what would be considered in a general way, non-essential versus essential consumption under your national sales tax plan, and then who would make that judgment?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think the people need to make the judgment, and that's we at some point some people have to compile that information and make a decision, just like we do in the Libertarian Party when we nominate a candidate. Somebody's got to compile the data. But that said, I'm pretty close to a Gary Johnson fair tax plan, actually, in the way that I look at it. I think that we need to exempt those things that we agree that are essential to living. And again, that would be up to the people to have a voice in deciding. The worst thing in the world is to front end load every decision and then say, I'm all for the people having a voice, but here's what I'm going to do. So I really believe that we need to do that. As far as the nature of the tax, I mean, I think we all agree that taxation, I'm not going to say taxation is theft, because it can be voluntary. But taxation is an evil, even if it's a necessary evil, and we need to keep it to its absolute minimum level to only fund those things that we agree as a people that the government needs to be doing, which there's already constraint on that, and we've already gone way past the constraints. We need to reel government into that so that we're not funding things that the government ought not be doing to us. So that said, a voluntary tax is a tax on things that people have a choice of whether they're going to buy or not, and not the things that they have to stay alive.
Okay, fair enough.
Larry, do you have a response to that topic? Do you want to talk about that?
No, it's good.
Okay. All right. Why don't you go ahead and ask the next question then?
Me?
Sure.
Yeah, Larry. Have Larry ask the next
I don't
question
have
on the
any.
topic.
Go on.
Okay. Okay, Ken, then go ahead.
Okay, for either of the guys, and I'd
You'll get
just
your
love
other
to talk about it. Reparations, good, bad, or ugly. So let's talk about reparations. And I am not just talking about any one particular group. We've got Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, Native Alaskans, African Americans, Japanese. We got a lot of people that are in that bus.
I'll touch the one that affects me directly. I am a descendant of slaves, so I don't have a problem touching that at all. The most, as a general rule, do I want the government to pay people out? No, as a general rule, I don't. There are some exceptions, obviously. If the people if the thing that happened was government sponsored and or government supported, and the people who did the bad thing are here and around, and the people who took the brunt of the bad thing are here and around, I'm not necessarily against the government writing checks to right that wrong. I'm not against that in theory. In the case of reparations for slavery, wow, is that hard? It's so hard because the people who did the slavery are long dead, and the slaves are long dead. However, the people who are benefiting from slavery, they still exist, but it's not their fault. It's not their fault they're benefiting from slavery. They didn't go, yay, I'm so glad my ancestors were slaves. They're not saying that. And the people who were being affected by slavery, still to this day, my last name is Sharpe. I'm black on my father's side. That doesn't mean anything. That means that people owned me are named Sharpe, right?
Yep.
It doesn't go back to my history of my family in France.
Right,
it doesn't
exactly.
do that, right? It literally is, it just shows that my family was owned. Why some people don't know why Malcolm X was Malcolm X, right? Malcolm was the name his mother gave him, and therefore was his name he accepted. His mother gave him that name, that is his name. But his name was Little, and his Little was his slave name. And he would never know what his actual ancestry would ever be. Therefore, it became X, the unknown, something that no one would ever know. Therefore, he became Malcolm X. That's the whole purpose behind it. So descendants of slaves live with this every day. Is it crushing and soul crushing? A part of it can be, but for most people, it isn't. Is there a disadvantage? Yes, absolutely. And the biggest disadvantage in the case of descendants of slaves is the lack of the ability to pass wealth down from generation to generation.
Exactly.
That is the biggest piece of all those things, because that hurts self-ownership. That hurts the idea of who you are. That hurts the family bond that people have. That hurts your culture. That hurts everything. So, well, someone might say, well, then Larry, write the descendants of slaves a check. I don't want to do that. And a lot of people get mad. I don't want to do that. And the reason is, if you write them a check, what's going to happen? Two things. One, they're going to piss it away. Larry, that's racist. No, that's human. How do I know that? The lottery. Look at the lottery. People who win the lottery, over 50% of people who win the lottery 5 years later are worse off. About a third go bankrupt. So giving people a bunch of cash is bad for them. I don't want to destroy my people's community. I want to give them a sense of ownership in their own community. So a bunch of cash is not going to work well. It's just going to hurt. Not just that, when people get payouts, right? They get a settlement and they get a bunch of payouts coming up. What happens? They sell the settlements away. You see the commercials on TV all the time. Give us money. It's your money. Get your cash now. We'll take your payments. That is a racket now that's happened. Here's what I want. If we're going to make things right, the concept of 40 acres and a mule in 1865 was a wonderful concept. It was the idea that the people who were slave owners, the people who did the bad, would actually lose some of their land, and that would then go to the people who they hurt, direct reparations, and they could now keep that land and that mule and keep it in their family, and then transfer that wealth down the line. That's now gone. So how do you provide reparations? You give people who are descendants of slaves the ability to have ownership with a bit of an advantage to others. So something like, if any business, and we have an example of that, by the way, already in New York City. It's called MWBE, Minority and Women-Owned Businesses and Enterprises, right? You give an advantage to people who are descendants of slaves in business and in property, and you give it for a specific timeline. The problem with New York City is it's forever, which creates second-class citizens, which creates businesses that aren't that good, I don't want that. I want a specific time, perhaps 22 years, which is a generation last I remember. So maybe it's one generation where they get a benefit. Here's what happens. If all of a sudden you get benefits, if you have an African-American descendant of slaves on your board, you'll have more African-Americans on the board. They will then learn, they will then understand that, they will have ownership, and they will transfer that ownership to others. They will have more people, maybe occupational licensing goes away if you're that, right? So now you have more people who are growing businesses. All those things to make things better, either in land and or property in some way, shape, or form, in my view, is the only way you can have reparations when the time has passed so long. Because not only do you not hurt other people, you allow them to integrate by default, because you'll want people of color or who are descendants of slaves. You'll want them in your businesses. You'll want them in your land grabs. You'll want them in your real estate deals. So you will actually integrate without force. You will actually make things better. That is the way I can see any type of reparations for descendants of slaves.
Spike, do you want to address that one?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we're looking at a very sticky situation, like Larry and Ken both said. You have a situation where a terrible societal injustice was done. And again, not just to the descendants of chattel slaves, to the descendants of the people that previously lived on this land before a tremendous number of white people came here and decided to make a country out of it, and put a government up and create and break one treaty after the next, until now they are herded into areas where they often are not allowed to own land in these reservations for the different natives. I'm sure it's the same for the Native Hawaiians, similar situation. But now the people that originally had that done to them, long gone. People who originally did that to them are also long gone. I think, first of all, before we look at any kind of reparations, the harm needs to stop. So, for example, the war on drugs, the occupational licensing, all of these policies that were put in place to keep marginalized communities, for example, people of color and indigenous people, in a position of entrenched generational poverty. End that first, because for us to talk about how to heal a wound while someone is still actively stabbing that wound makes no sense. So we have to stop the stabbing. We have to stop that from happening. The next thing we do is look at how does an organization that claims violently or through the threat of violence claims ownership of vast swaths of land and vast amounts of mineral and oil holdings and land holdings and claims to own all of this, how can they bestow some level of ownership to the people who they essentially stole it from, stole their labor, stole their land, stole their identity, stole their entirety of who they were? How do they give it back? I think any reparations needs to happen with two things in mind: ending the harm and reducing the size and scope of the very entity that did that to them in the first place. Instead of taxing us all of us who had nothing to do with it, like Larry said, one way or another, we had nothing to do with it. Instead of robbing us even more for it, let's cut this government down to size and divvy away some of what it has to the people who are the rightful owners of it.
The richest corporation on the planet is not Amazon; it's the U.S. government.
Exactly.
And you're right. And nobody profited more from the damage that was done to the indigenous peoples or anyone else than the U.S. government.
That's correct.
I'm with you guys. Okay, we're done here. We can leave now. So,
okay, we can leave.
All right, Spike. I don't know if there was a little. I think we may have had a misunderstanding earlier, but how many more questions did you prepare, Spike?
Oh, I had one for Ken and one for Larry, but then Larry didn't have any questions. So do you want me to ask Larry my question, or do you just want to move? I know we're kind of past time, so I can ask him, or we can go on to the.
Actually, we're about okay on time.
See how good I am? I care about you guys.
Right. So yeah, you can ask Larry the question and try to keep it maybe a little brief, but we're okay.
Okay, no problem. So Larry, I love you very much. I want to give you a chance here in a very friendly crowd. Your running mate, Jim Gray, as we know, is a proponent of the negative income tax, otherwise known as a form of universal basic income, and also of the fair tax. These are both things that don't really fit within our party platform or really within the principles behind what we believe. You have plenty of time to defend that being libertarian or not. My question is, if you got the nomination and Judge Jim Gray got the nomination, or someone else got the nomination and you were proposing these things, and inevitably a voter or reporter or someone comes to you and asks you how this lines up with libertarian principles, what do you say to that?
Yeah, no, I have no problem at all. I believe Amash also supports some form of UBI also, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't really like his UBI that much either. I'm not a fan of UBI. I never have been a fan of UBI. I've spoken against it, for years. I'm not a fan of UBI. The reality of it is, though, and this is just the reality of it, we have an oppressive, horrible welfare state that keeps people down, that is bureaucratic, that can't even deliver the services it's supposed to deliver. If I can create any type of plan that will pull that boot off, that will destroy the IRS, that will get rid of the bureaucracy, that will actually be fair for people, I'm in. That's my defense, period. That's it. Now, you might go, but Larry, we should get rid of all income tax. You're right. Oh, my God. Yes, I agree. If you know what I know, that's not even close to happening. If you see the deficits we're in, nowhere near close to happening. You said taxation is theft. But what if there's consent? It's not theft. Over 80% of the American population, in every single time you do any survey whatsoever, will always say they believe in their hearts the only way to have society is through taxation, which means 80% or more of Americans believe that it's okay to tax them. They consent. It cannot be theft. Therefore, by default, we have a lot of work to do. We have to convince Americans that there are other ways of funding what we want without taxation. That was my entire plan when I was running for governor. I was showing other ways of raising money without taxation. That was my entire plan, and I still have that now. So if I had to take a candidate, whether they want some form of UBI or whether they want negative income tax or whether they want to trash income tax, that's my favorite. As long as they are reducing the size and scope of government, as long as they are getting rid of that federal bureaucracy and disbanding the IRS, I'll take it. I'm in. I will take it.
Do I have time for a follow up on the getting rid of the IRS? So with the fair tax, which is, as I understand it, it works out to either 23 or 30% national consumption tax with a prebate based on your income. Now, one of the things that it says it will do is get rid of the IRS. What I've never understood, and I've asked fair tax people for like 15 years since I first heard of it, and I've never really gotten a good answer. Maybe you can give me one. Is if we're getting rid of the IRS, but we're replacing it with an organization who determines what your income is, which you're going to have to continue reporting in order to be able to know what your prebate is. How are we not ending up with something that is the IRS, but just with possibly another name?
Yeah, there's two parts to that. The first one is if we do it the way the judge wants it to be done, all other forms of public assistance go away, right? So there is no EBT, there's no WIC, there's no disability, there's no Social Security, nothing. It all goes away. All that stuff kind of goes away if this is done right? Because that's how someone is paid. They're paid that way, right? So the bureaucracy goes away. The IRS will not be the intrusive piece that it is now. It'll just be, did you make that amount of money? Awesome. That's it. That's it. So I guess maybe I should change my language. Maybe my language is incorrect. You don't get rid of the IRS. You get rid of the IRS as it is now. So you pull a lot of the teeth out of the IRS. It isn't as intrusive. So maybe that's a better way of putting it. So is the perfect answer? No. Is it better? Yeah. And is it better than what Biden or Trump is going to do? Yeah, I'll take it.
Anything's going to be better than what they do. Yeah, of course.
So right. I would take it. Is it perfect? No, I'm not. Do you want me to sit here and tell you I love UBI? I don't. I've been very adamant. I don't. But it doesn't matter, to be forward with you. I know people get mad at me when I say this. I'm being forward with you. There were many parts of what Gary Johnson said and did I didn't agree with. But damn it, I wish he was president now. I wish he was president now. So I would take him and his answers I didn't agree with and his policies I was not happy with. I would take them now in a heartbeat, so happy, and I would defend him on TV like there's no tomorrow. And I will defend others. I'll give you an example of one policy I disagree with someone else. Hornberger's policy of bringing the troops home and dismissing them immediately. I think it's a terrible policy. If you bring all the troops home right away and dismiss them, and Ken's nodding his head because he knows, you are literally taking tens of thousands of men and sentencing them to suicide. That's what you're doing. That is a fact that will happen. Data is proven. Every vet knows this. You will have to have some form of, when they come home, transition, or they are not going to fit in and they are going to put shotguns in their mouths. Would I support Hornberger if he was president? Yes, because it's still better than what the hell I got. Right. And I would try to convince Hornberger to not do that if he actually won. And I would try to convince everyone who wants UBI to not do UBI if they won. But still, I would take it. I want our country to be better. I accept it. Absolutely, yes.
Right, but then why run on that to begin with? Why not instead, like
I'm not running for president.
But I understand. But why not try to encourage them to push for voluntary fees for direct services from government?
I'm not.
Okay.
Okay.
Who said I'm not?
No,
I'm not running for president.
Okay.
I have who I have, and I have who I think, it is my opinion, who has the best chance of making impact. And if lightning strikes, they'll vote for him, and they will actually put him in the White House. That's what I believe. If lightning strikes, they will vote for him and put him in the White House, and that's what I want. And if he gets in the White House, I will try to talk him into what I think is the right answers.
All right, let's give Ken a brief chance to answer that. If you want to address UBI and or the national sales tax, Ken.
Well, yeah, I agree a lot with Larry's principles there. I think we may part ways a little bit on execution, but I think all of us are in agreement that we need to get the income tax is a penalty on productivity. That's stupid.
Absolutely.
I don't care. I don't care if it's illegal. I don't care if it's constitutional. I don't care if it's theft.
Yep.
It's damaging to a free society. It's a dumb thing to do. So we need to transition to a voluntary tax if we're going to have any tax at all.
Yep.
And right now, the honest truth is, until we've got 60% of the Congress with an L after their name, we've got to deal with the hand we're dealt, which means we've got to give them a really good plan to downsize government, to continue some form of revenue, and do it in a way that doesn't penalize people for productivity. And by the way, we got to get rid of this fiat currency. We've got to get rid of the Fed, and hopefully go to alternative currencies, which means that the IRS wouldn't do us any good at all, because the IRS tracks U.S. currency, and we don't want the damn U.S. currency. So we have to come up with a different method.
Free banking.
I was against income tax when I ran for governor. I had a 4-year plan to get rid of the New York State income tax. Now, people said you have to get rid of the income tax. I would have loved to, but there's no way that in New York State, with a $190 billion budget, a $400 billion debt. At that time, $6 billion deficit, now $16 billion deficit, right? That we're gonna lose $40 billion, which is what we suck out of our economy in income tax. We just couldn't do it. Nobody would vote for it in overnight. But could I do it over 4 years? Yeah. And how do I know that? Because I talked to local mayors when I was crossing the state, and they were like, oh, yeah, we could do that. So I had a 4-year plan to get rid of our state income tax. To think that I'm for income tax, the data is against that. I had an actual plan to get rid of it. And local people were like, you know what? That might actually work. But it was a 4-year plan. For me to say I'm getting rid of income tax tomorrow, New York State would have said, no, you get nothing. In fact, add more. You know this, Spike. What you want to do without question is you want to have a plan or idea or concept that is radical enough to motivate people, but familiar enough for them not to run away from it. When you're putting something in a market, you want to find some kind of right idea, and we try, and sometimes you make it, sometimes we don't. But if you're too radical and it's not familiar, they run away from it. If it's too familiar, not radical, they're not inspired. They don't change.
Yeah, but I think the familiarity comes from arguing from their precepts. So for example, when I was talking about education, I didn't propose some kind of a step plan from the current system until into the having voluntary internship and apprenticeship. I said, how about we do that? But I made a point of actually hearing what it was to have to say first. I reject the idea that we need to do this in half measures. And I think, and to be clear, I think that's the biggest difference in why we all aren't just, lining up behind one of us for VP. I think this is the clearest difference here, is the idea of what is called pragmatism, which I would argue you can't call it pragmatism if it hasn't worked yet, and what some call radicalism, what I call just being consistent in principle with honest about what our principles are. I think the problem here is that when we present a pragmatic, or what I would call a scared pool or half measure, what happens is we're giving the voters one of two choices. We're giving them the choice that they're familiar with, which is the Republicans and Democrats, which don't really represent them and don't really give good solutions, but they're likely to win. Or we give the second choice, which seems like it's better than the Republican or Democrats, but statistically has very little chance of winning. And that's how we end up with 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4%. Maybe we'll get 5%. I don't believe it's how we win. I think that we win by disabusing the public of the notion that there's anything good about the current system. And
one issue I have with this, I feel like what you're saying is, if we present a half measure, that means we don't tell them the truth. No, I've told everybody, and I've been open. I want a 100% voluntary society. That's what I want. I've never lied about that. I've never covered that up. I've told everybody that. That's what I want. But I realize that for me to get that, I have to get a bunch of people who can't even imagine that, who, when they hear you say anarchy, what they hear is chaos in the streets. That's what they hear when you say anarchy. I have to change that mindset, the culture piece of what I'm talking about. When I did my education plan, I can't stand public education. I've never said anything other. What I said was, why don't we change our current system? And I had to work within our system. In New York State, the Constitution says New York State must pay for education 1 to 12. In New York State, education is a right in our Constitution. We've already put it in. The state must pay for 1 to 12. Must. I can't say no without a constitutional change, right? As governor. So what did I say? I said, why don't we change our system from K through 12 to K through 10? And then at that point, the last 2 years, we give people basically the equivalent of what I called a GI Bill for kids. Ken knows what that is, right? When you got a military, they give you a bunch of cash. Where you want to go? You get $20,000. Go anywhere you want. You have a couple of options. Go to a trade school. Go to a college right away if you're super smart. Go to prep school to go to college. Go get a job if you want to. Do whatever you want to do. Go. You got $20,000 in 5 years. Now, people say, well, Larry, how in the world are you going to create these schools? I'm not. Anyone now can create schools, and they will. Private schools will pop up. They'll all be 2-year schools. They'll all get loans. Why? Guaranteed government money. Right. What am I actually doing? I'm privatizing 2 years of school. That's radical as hell. But I'm doing it in a way that people said, oh my God, it would work. And I might say, but Larry, government's still spending money. It is. But in New York State, we drop $23,000 per kid per year. That's what we drop. Now this is now $10,000 per kid per year. We would save $4 billion or $5 billion or $6 billion per year because some kids wouldn't even use it. But on top of that, my entire plan with that was now you don't have any need for standardized testing, which means the federal government doesn't want to give us any money anymore. All the ties to the federal government are cut. I cut all federal ties from the federal government, allowing localized schools to do what they want and privatizing 2 years of high school. And I had every teacher I met tell me, oh my God, what a great plan. That's radical. And that is getting rid of public schools. It's getting the federal government out and less spending, all of those things. And you know what? Teachers loved it.
Okay,
right, but it also, but the teachers union still went after you, right? They still accused you wanting to destroy public education. Why not instead focus on a message of why that system failed and forcing them on the defense? Right, but if you're also then saying, but let's do this half measure way away from it, then don't you lose some of your momentum in forcing them to defend their system?
The two things that stuck from my campaign, of 3 years ago. One, K through 10. I still get teachers emailing me, talking to me about it all the time. That stuck. Second thing, regulate like onions. That's how I wanted to regulate cannabis.
With weed, yeah.
Like onions, right? Now you might say, well, why should the government regulate anything? Because the average New Yorker loves to regulate. So I said regulate it like something that's not really regulated. Right. That's my familiar.
Let's get Ken hop in.
I need to kind of
please
point out a problem, an inconsistency here. And Spike, Vermin is my friend. I love him to death, and so I'm loath to even throw any rocks at him. But Vermin has said repeatedly that his goal is to get 5% in this election to continue ballot access. He's said that over and over again, that his goal, and he sort of ridicules me when I say that my goal is to win the election, that the only goal I have is to go all the way. So it's a little inconsistent then to say, well, gee, you're being incrementalist about your approach to taxes. We're willing to accept no control at all of government to get 5% and be content with that after 50 years as a party. So we have zero control of government. We want 100% principle. I'm saying let's take back the government, but in order to do that, we acknowledge that we're not going to be the ruling party all at one time, and we're going to need to work with other people, and we're going to need to, like Larry said, and I'm 100% on board with this, it has to be familiar.
Oh no.
Board with it enough. Whoop, are we there?
You're back, Ken. Go ahead.
Am I still here? Okay. All right. We lost our server for a minute. We have to be radical enough to inspire people to change. And that's where, yes, am I an incrementalist? I am. I would love to flip the switch and turn us into a libertarian utopia. It ain't going to happen. I'd rather have leadership of change than no leadership at all of 100% principle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
you said it's not working. It does work, man.
Yeah. Okay. So Ken brought up something with Vermin. So
let me jump in 1 second. I think we're going to count that as Ken's second question, and then let each person respond to it a couple times. Ken, I hope that's okay with you, because we're a little bit.
That's great.
Okay, we're over a little bit on time, so each of you can briefly respond to that.
Spike.
Go ahead, Spike. Yeah, Larry, it's Spike's fault.
I'd like to apologize for this. No, listen. So what we've talked about, what Vermin has talked about, and we've said, I mean, we hear it over and over again that 5% is victory, and that's obviously nonsense. 5% might be a goal that we need in order to be able to get the ballot access and everything that comes with that. But victory is victory. Winning the election is victory. And in order to do that, if we're ever going to win in this election cycle or any other, we have to affect the culture, and we have to actually present our principles to the culture. So Vermin has presented, I don't believe, and I'll let Vermin speak to himself, but I don't believe Vermin has ever said that our goal, that we shouldn't try to be winning the election, because we certainly should be trying to win the election. And I am all for actual pragmatism and actual incrementalism after they move. We make clear the problems that they have created and what our solutions are based on our platform, and we force them to defend it. And by the way, this gets us attention. When we propose something that is such a radical departure from anything anyone else, including other banner people in our party, other presidential and vice presidential candidates in our party have proposed, when we put forward something that is so radical that they have to pay attention to it, and they come to us and go, how could you possibly be proposing all of these different things? We say, how could you possibly be defending it? Force them to defend it. And then when we do get power, when we get elected at the down ballot level, at the local, regional, state, and federal level, and every other level in between, when we do that, now we can negotiate. Now, when they come to us, actually in power, not proposing something that, you know, is somewhere between our platform and what they're proposing, but actually proposing our actual platform. Now we're in power, and they go, okay, well, if instead of getting rid of the taxes entirely, how about we cut taxes by 30%? Or if instead of getting rid of the Department of Education in full, how about we simply reduce its duties down to a very minimal level as a beginning step? We go, absolutely, let's actually negotiate now. But I will say to the end, I do not believe that starting a negotiation from something other than what we want at the end is a good idea. I think we start with that, and then and again, they're in the bad position.
But I'm telling you,
they're the ones who screwed everything up. Let them.
I'm telling you, it already worked. In New York State, it already worked. I went from 0 libertarians for 45 years to 103 in 1 year. Local. That's a win. I went from never having ballot access in New York State to now having it for the first time ever. I went from 15,000 votes across the entire state to over 100,000. I'm telling you, it worked. People were getting me on TV so I can talk about my idea of leasing naming rights for bridges, which is another way of avoiding tax, right? Which is radical enough, no taxes, no tolls, but familiar enough to the adopt a highway plan.
Yeah, and for that specific thing, I'd be behind that 100%. Let it be voluntarily funded. I'm fine with voluntary funding of things.
And that's what I'm saying. You're telling me, you're acting like I'm not putting out
No. I was specifically on those specific issues. Overall, let me be clear on that. Ken Armstrong and Larry Sharpe. Am I pointing, because this is a mirror of what I'm seeing? Ken Armstrong and Larry Sharpe are libertarians. We would do far better with them as vice president than anyone else that's running in any other party. So I want to be clear on that. I'm talking about the strategy on those specific issues where we're doing half measures as opposed to the full thing. But no, using naming rights for a bridge is a perfect example of a radical and practical platform.
Just by way of accountability, because we've had to have this conversation a few times, and I hate to be the guy that's bashing Vermin, but honestly, look at the tape of the Dayton conference where Vermin was asked a question and he said, I'm not going to ask that. I'm not going to answer that question because I don't plan on being president. I'm not going to be elected, and I have no intention of being elected. The point is, you can take your incrementalism from either end. You can say, well, we're going to be 100% when we're finally the party in power and we can have our way, or we can say we can ease into power, and as we ease into power, we can gradually take the pieces we need to ultimately, as our power grows, to become more and more that thing that we want to become. It's two perspectives of the same thing. To point at incrementalism and then say, but we're going to wait until we own the whole thing before we change is
incrementalism in policy as opposed to actual messaging and strategy is the difference. Again, I'm in favor of incrementalism. I don't know of it, and I'm not saying that you're incorrect. I don't know of a time of Vermin saying he doesn't want to be the president. And if he said it then you'll have to ask him about that. I am running, if I am the nominee to run for vice president. I know what our odds are. I know what our challenges are. And I know that we need to make an effect in the culture, because we have to jump from the 3.25 that Bill and Gary got to probably closer to 35 or 40% to truly be able to win well enough to get enough votes to win the electoral college. And knowing how many in that if we could actually do that, we'd also more than likely be getting a bunch of votes down ballot, have more libertarians in Congress, have more libertarians on all the different state and local level. So incrementalism and pragmatism as a means of achieving goals once we're actually getting in power, absolutely. I'm talking about specifically the messaging and strategy. I think needs to be based on solely on our platform and our beliefs. But in policy, it's
we gotta.
I know, and this is the eternal debate. So right. I respect. Yeah,
it's good. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to go to audience questions, and we were originally going to have each person have 3 minutes, but because you guys talk too much, we're going to do. It was
Larry's fault.
Yeah,
it's Larry's fault.
It's my fault.
It's Connor's fault. Connor.
Yeah.
Why would you do that, Connor?
Not doing his job, Connor.
Yeah.
Getting the ball. Getting the ball, Connor.
He's doing fine. So what we're going to do is
violation.
We're gonna keep the answers to 2 minutes, and when you get to 2 minutes, I'm going to put my hand up, and that means wrap up your thought. Please be considerate and keep going. I love talking to each and every one of you guys, but we're trying to stick to a schedule. I'm not scolding anybody, but just
we
explaining why. Okay, the first question I thought was pretty neat, and I'm rephrasing it a little bit. This is from JC. Of course, you know that I think Ken mentioned it, that the vice president is supposed to preside over the Senate, and I think usually when he comes in and swears in the new senators, and I don't know if he usually gets to give like a little address to the Senate, but let's say you had the 100 senators there as vice president. A captive audience to speak to them for 20 minutes or a half hour, what would you say to them in that opening address as presiding over the Senate? And let's go with we'll go alphabetical on this. Ken.
Well, I'd say that your days of hiding the truth from the American people are over. There's a new sheriff in town. And by the way, you see that chair up there that's usually empty for the president of the Senate. My butt's going to be in that chair because we're going to preside over the deliberations of this Senate, and we're going to make those deliberations public. We're going to make sure that the American people know what decisions their government is making. And we're going to hold the other branches of government to that same standard, to that litmus test of what do the American people ask us to do, what's in our contract with them and what's not. And if it's not in our contract, we shouldn't be doing it. Thomas Jefferson, as far as I know, was actually the last president, vice president rather, to fully exercise that role of presiding over the deliberations of Senate. And I can only assume it's because we've had 40-some lazy buggers who just wanted to let somebody else do the hard work. Right. So we need to not be lazy. We need to take our time and be serious about it.
Okay. Spike, go ahead.
So I'd like to sue Ken for a violation of the NAP for stealing my answer. No, pretty much the same thing. Listen, I mean, I would be saying your days are numbered. I'm going to be here watching you. Your days of centrally planning the American people into oblivion are over. Your days of controlling every aspect of our lives are over. And I will be using that seat up there. You even took that seat up there. Like, I mean, come on.
Brilliant mind, Spike.
Yeah, but that's the problem. I think that we have a hive mind, but then you took all of it. But no, your days of doing these things are over, and I'm going to be using the bully pulpit that comes with my office to draw a very clear dividing line in the sand between us who want to take the boot off of the neck of the market of the people to be free to make the choices they need in a spontaneous and dynamic and free way that's going to be way better than anything you could do. And you on this side who want to continue with the suffering that is caused directly by your central arbitrary decisions that are usually influenced by your cronies who have a vested interest in keeping the rest of us down to their benefit. You and your cronies, your days are numbered.
Great.
Larry. I would take a completely different tact from both of them. I would literally say, guys, I'm here now. And since I'm here, we're going to have a split Senate. We always do. There's going to be 5 or 10 people who could actually decide where things go, left or right. If it doesn't already exist, I will say I am today creating the Libertarian Senate Caucus, right? The Senate Caucus of Libertarians. And anybody who wants to join, if you actually want to make your government smaller, like you said, if you actually want to help your people, like you've said, if you actually want to get things done and get our president to actually sign your bills, join my caucus. We will be the ones in the middle who will make sure that the good stuff from each will be able to cut stuff down, repeal things, do great stuff to make you look good, and you can actually do what you're supposed to do. We will give you ways to actually help your people by reducing our deficit, lowering our tax burden, and making your people happy. When you want that, you let me know. I'm here. I'll be in that chair up there. Come see me after, and we will build this caucus out, and we will make the Senate a place that you can be proud of. You can go back. And all the people still want to fight, they'll fight, and they'll keep fighting, but you'll be winning because the bills that you tell your people you're going to pass, you'll actually pass. Our president will pass your bills. Join my caucus. Join my caucus, and we'll all win.
We all agree that we're going to reference the chair, correct?
Because that's Ken's thing. I'm copying the Ken chair.
Okay, we have a question from John, and he references a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Great book.
Yeah, it's a famous, I think, leadership book over the last few years. And so John's question is, great organizations center everything around their reason for being. What, in your perspective, is the LP's why? And we'll go Spike, Larry, Ken on this.
That's an excellent question. I mean, our statement of principles says what it is. We challenge the cult of the omnipotent state. We were created and founded as an alliance between anarchists and minarchists to recognize that, again, we are headed this way. If this way is freedom and this way is utter subjugation, we are headed this way at various speeds, but always headed that way. We don't even ever stop. We're always headed in that direction, and acknowledging that in order to change that, in order to actually have a day that we are at least stop moving in that direction and turn around and start moving at whatever speed in the direction towards freedom, that we have to completely change the culture and the conversation that is happening. And the conversation right now is a really ugly one that is led by those central planners that have beaten people up and put them in situations where they are so subjugated and in such destitute situations. The vast majority of Americans are something like 2 or 3 paychecks away from utter destitution. That's not an accident. That is by the design of central planning. That is the one thing that they've designed that's actually happened, is that the vast majority of Americans are one lockdown away from questioning whether they'll be able to feed their families or not. And when you're in that kind of situation, you look to who you've been told your entire life since you were a little kid and couldn't even talk, been told who were your authorities, the people that stand over you to make everything better and to protect you, the very people who harmed you and put you in that situation. And we as an organization and as a party need to push forward on explaining that and showing them that that is the problem, and that our solution, the libertarian solution, is simply allowing people to be free and taking that boot off of their throat and letting them live their lives.
Great. Right in under the wire by about 10 seconds. Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to cover 2 things that came out. I clearly did not communicate this well because I have 2 people in the comments who say Larry's going to create centralized control to centralize something. It's not what I said at all. Sorry, not what I meant to say. Clearly, that's what came out. What I was saying is, you join my caucus because if you want your bills passed, you will have to make things better. You will have to actually help people by removing government, by removing the boot, as Spike said. I'm stealing your stuff, Spike. By removing
the chair, everyone's stealing the boot.
Stealing your stuff. So by removing it all. So you're not going to get your stuff voted on. You're not going to get your stuff signed if you don't join the caucus and start actually helping people. That's what my libertarian caucus would be. Not a centralized, none of that crap. It's not what I never do the old, we're fiscally conservative, and I never do that, ever. So that's not true. Now, what the party does, I think the party has changed. I think when the party first began, there was no real liberty movement except for the Libertarian Party. Now, in my view, and many people disagree, I think the Libertarian Party is part of a broader libertarian movement. The libertarian movement is part of all types of things: activism, stunt activism, ballot access, getting referendums, all kinds of things, media, all types. And the movement is critical and important, which is why most people call me a more mainstream politician. You will never hear me say, get rid of the radicals or get rid of the anarchists. I want them all. They're all important. They're all valuable. I want all of them. So I think the party's job now is, it's the political arm of the movement. Its job is to count votes, get ballot access, and to validate our movement through the ballot box. Right? There are many ways to validate our movement. The one I think the party has to do is to validate movement through the ballot box. We have to be able to do a very tough juggle, which is retain our policies and our principles while still getting people to vote for us, and manage that hard. And we fail often, but I can see in my own state, and I can see now we are getting better, and we'll keep getting better.
Okay, great. Ken.
So I think the big why that we need to be able to get the American people to ask themselves is, why should anyone else decide for me? And that really is like the number one question that we should be teaching them to ask. There are times when we need to protect people from people. You know, if somebody's swinging his fist and he doesn't know to stop at my nose, I want some protection there so that he doesn't swing his fist into my nose. So he doesn't have absolute freedom to swing his fist wherever he wants, just wherever he wants without hurting me. But his right to decide to swing his fist is his right and his right alone, and I shouldn't have any input into deciding that for him. So what we need to do is we need to ask, is there a reason why I shouldn't be the one to decide this? If I want to use psychedelic drugs, is there a reason why I shouldn't be the guy that decides whether I use psychedelic drugs or not? If I'm not hurting you, who the hell are you to make up my mind for me? So
Right.
The big question always has to be why.
Okay, great. You caught me off guard there, Ken. You only took a little bit over a minute. Let's get to the next question. And I'm going to read this question exactly as it's written, and it kind of calls for an either or answer, but I think there's a more nuanced way to do it. So you guys can answer it however you like. And Larry's going to go first on this one. And it's, do you hold the Constitution or the non-aggression principle in higher regard?
Without question, the non-aggression principle. The Constitution made me 3/5 of a person.
Yeah. Is that your full answer?
I love the Constitution. I love it. Right. But if I have a choice, the laws are written and change. Right. Principles don't change. Right. There's an argument that people will give if you're not a nation of laws, then you're a nation of men. Right. Neither are impressive. Neither are impressive. Imperial Japan was a nation of laws. Without question. The Weimar Republic, before Hitler took over, was a nation of laws. So what? I don't give a shit. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Are you a nation of principles? That's what matters. So any principle is always going to be more important than a law. Every single time it's going to be. Doesn't mean I don't respect the Constitution. I took an oath, right? I took an oath to defend the Constitution. So did Ken. We took an oath to defend the Constitution. Of course I want to defend the Constitution. Absolutely. But the Constitution can be wrong. It has been wrong in the past many times and will be wrong again. So I love the Constitution. I will always defend the Constitution, but a principle always beats it.
Okay, Ken.
Well, so I believe we're a nation of people, not a nation of laws. And
Well,
so
I like that.
I have to say, well, because we have a lot of people tell us, well, we're a nation of laws, which means the people have to serve the law, not the other way around. So
I like that.
Even when it comes to the non-aggression principle, we have to remember that people are sovereign. And so we can use the non-aggression principle. There's disagreement in our party about how to apply NAP to abortion, for example.
Absolutely.
And we could weaponize NAP to get our way. What we have to do is we have to stop making laws paramount and start making the people paramount.
I like that.
Okay, great. Spike.
I want to change my answer to his.
Yeah, I was going to say, Em stole my answer again. No, I think the NAP is a very intuitive and innately understood part of being a libertarian. It goes back to the concept of self-ownership. If we own ourselves, we own our lives, we own our bodies, we own our labor, and we own our property, which is the product of our labor, then it is innately and manifestly true that anyone trying to take from that, or if you try to take from someone else's, that you are committing an aggression against them, and that is both morally wrong, and it's because it's obvious that that's not something you should do. If someone owns something, if someone has it for them, then you shouldn't take it from them, and they shouldn't take from you. But it's also in a utilitarian manner, it's wrong. you having owned something are going to be a better steward of that thing that you own than someone else stealing it from you and capriciously deciding how they're going to use it. Because ultimately, if they want more to deal with, if they want more to use, they'll just take from you or someone else. So they have no real stewardship. They have no real concept of how to do it right. That is the bottom line of what government is. Government is an organization that takes from you largely as it sees fit in order to do things that it largely decides it wants to do. Every once in a while, it may or may not consider you, but it is never going to do as well under any kind of charter authorizing it than a principle that is based on the idea of you owning what you have and of you working in free association with others to create solutions to the problems that just happen in everyday life and to innovate and move past problems that we don't have them anymore. The NAP is always going to be above anything that presumes to authorize authority, derived authority that's derived by itself, by the fact that someone wrote it on a sheet of paper, authorizing itself to derive some kind of contrived authority over everyone else.
Okay.
My paper is magical because my paper says so.
Exactly.
Right.
It says right here on this here napkin. Yep.
The sacred napkin.
The sacred napkin, yeah.
I think we've got time for one more audience question, and I apologize to everyone who, A, if Connor didn't forward it to me, and B, if I didn't choose it.
We talk too much. Just say it. We talk.
No, it's okay. Yeah, but there were also some bad questions, and not just. And it doesn't mean it was. Your question was bad if I didn't say it, but there were a couple weird ones. Anyway, have you thought about the process, Tyler asked, of ending the Federal Reserve? If so, and if the president, or I guess the presidential candidate, ask you for your advice on how to talk about the process of carrying out that objective, what would it be? And Ken, I think you go first on this.
Well, I've said many times that I would audit the Federal Reserve first, and a lot of people take that as meaning I don't want to end it. No, I absolutely want to end it. I just want to prove to the American people that they've been had by a Ponzi scheme, and I think that auditing it and proving to the American people that they've been preyed upon and scammed on by a constitutionally approved Ponzi scheme is the right way. And then we need to dismantle it. We need to get rid of fiat currency. We need to dismantle the Fed. We probably don't even need a national currency. I think the world has evolved past that place. Yeah. But we definitely don't need a private corporation ruling our lives.
Great. Spike.
I think I'm in favor of auditing the Fed as a means of ending the Fed. I'm also in favor of just ending the Fed. I think probably the easiest thing to do would be to allow the market to end the Fed itself by allowing for free market banking. I think if you remove the restrictions that make Federal Reserve notes the only legal U.S. tender to be used in the U.S., and you simply allow the market to do what it's going to do. If they want to move to, if banks want to issue things based on a gold standard, great. If they want to issue things based on a derived scarcity like cryptocurrency, that's also fine. Whatever the market does, let the market work it out. Let the market introduce currencies, competing currencies, to be able to, and they will quickly rise to the top. The market people will very quickly determine which ones are the best. Let's think about this for a while, because for those who are watching who may not be completely sold on libertarianism, or this may be a new concept to you.
None of them are watching.
Hopefully you are. Hopefully you're watching. Hopefully we've captured your attention. But let's be clear about, when we talk about inflation, when we talk about the constant cost of living, that increase every year, that is a direct result of quantitative easing, perpetual quantitative easing of the Federal Reserve notes. The Federal Reserve endlessly prints out trillions and now tens of trillions of Federal Reserve notes that it immediately buys T-bills with in order to fund the government. And when you create something more, when you create more of something without creating any additional commensurate value to go with it, you drive down the value of everything else of everything else of that. So if you just create a bunch more money and you don't create any more value from it, all the money, all of those same identical bills are worth that much less. And so that's why the cost of living keeps going down. How easy is it? And I talked with some college kids about this too, and they were all for it. I said, imagine if instead of the cost of living going up being just as of an assured thing as death and taxes, if instead we had a free market system. Imagine if your money over time actually gained value and the cost of living, if not going down, would actually stay the same. Are we almost, was that
That was 2 minutes, but
That was your done.
Okay. Free market banking.
Okay, great. Larry, go ahead.
Yes, I literally, I teach leadership for a living when I actually work. I'm not now, obviously, but when I work, I teach, and I teach at many government agencies in New York. I teach at businesses, banks, tech companies, whatever the case may be. And I remember one time I'm in a classroom, about 20 or so people in a classroom. I never talk about government or policy unless they ask, and it's during a break. It was during a break, and one guy says, about 20 people in the room, all educated professionals. One guy says, "Oh, I'm so glad we have the Fed, right? With the Fed, it saved us during the 2009 crash. I'm so happy we had them." And all I said was, "Hey, do you guys know the Fed's basically a private bank? Is basically a banking cartel. It's a private bank." All of them, "No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't." I said, "No, you have your phones. Google it." And they Googled it, and all of a sudden, "Oh my God, it is." Yeah. Do you also know the Fed can just magically make money? It can just make money? No, it can't. No, it can't. They all said no, even though they just saw I was right the last time. They're so ingrained, they couldn't imagine this to be true. So when I said, Google it. Oh my God, you're right. Why do I tell you this story? This is where we are. The vast majority of Americans don't think the Fed is a private bank. They think it's helping. And most Americans either don't know that we actually have a centralized bank, or don't even know what that is. So they can't even imagine that it's even true. Yep. So that's why I say audit the Fed. I'm with Ken 100%. I think audit the Fed is the right answer, because if we audit the Fed, we'll realize something. We can't just audit the Fed. They're a private bank. We can't just randomly decide to audit them, right? Yep. That's unfair. And just when people realize that, you know what will happen? The press will go, "Oh, wait," because the press doesn't know either. They don't know. The average American has no idea. And when someone's going to go, "Let me figure this out," look at it, we'll figure out it's a Ponzi scheme, and then we can plan to get ourselves off the Fed, as Ken said.
Great. Okay. We're coming in right about on time. We had planned to start right around now with 5-minute closing statements, but I wanted to do one quick thing. Does anybody have any, I'll give you a minute if you think that there's been a mischaracterization, intentional or otherwise, or a loose end from this that you want to tie up. Does anybody have anything like that?
Ken's not that good looking. Right? He's good looking, but not that good looking, all right?
Larry, you can't argue with the obvious facts. Come on now.
Okay. So anybody on that or no?
I just want to say my understanding of I have to think that if Vermin ever said it, and this isn't about me, but about Vermin, my running mate, if Vermin ever said anything along the lines of not running for president, we've been very clear that we are running to win, and that we are, but with the understanding of what our odds are, and that our push is going to be to do as well as we can and to affect as many people in the conversation and bring as many people into the party as we can. Okay. But to run to win with the idea that we are running for president and vice president.
Great. Anybody else with a quick correction?
Well, just if you add that piece, one of the major reasons why I decided to run, and why Gray is my number one choice, is because he came to me with a plan to actually get into the White House. He had an actual plan to get into the White House. It doesn't mean he can do it, but damn it, he's got a plan. And it was the first one I heard that I believed, and I said, I'm in.
Okay, good. Ken, anything on from you on that? Okay.
No, we're good.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and start with 5-minute? You have up to 5 minutes for your closing pitch, and the same deal. I'll give you one of these with 30 seconds left this time. 30 seconds. Okay.
Same order.
Well, does anybody have any problem with going? Let's go Ken, Larry, Spike this time.
Whatever's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So Ken Armstrong, Armstrong2020.com. I want to be sure to put that in there a few times so that Paul Grindle, my campaign manager, doesn't get upset with me for not mentioning Armstrong2020.com. Okay, so we did that. Obviously, you can see we got quite a bromance going here. We actually had to kind of manufacture things that we disagreed with, because it's at the very most, it's a matter of style between us. What we're talking about. We we all very much believe in the libertarian principles, and I got to tell you, I love these two guys, and even I don't even like to say I'm running against them. I'm running with them, and one of us will get the nomination. But I'm just a firm believer that anybody who runs on the libertarian ticket this year would be better than any of the alternatives. But we see just some of the best that the party has to offer here. So that said, why Ken? And I think what we've pointed up here in our discussions is that experience really matters. It really does matter that I know where the skeletons are buried in Washington. I know how the system works. I know how the system obfuscates, how it hides, how it manipulates the people. I've seen it for years and railed against it from the inside, by the way, and taken my opportunities. When you criticize your bosses, you don't do that publicly unless you want your career to be over. So you do it in ways that are quiet and internal. And that's what I've made my career doing. If I'm working for a president who I believe is wrong about something, I'm not going to go out on the stage and denounce him before I've had an opportunity to talk with him and share with him why I believe the principles of freedom and liberty are more important than whatever agenda he's trying to put forward. And again, I'm looking at the likely nominees of this party, and I can't see anybody that I wouldn't be willing to serve with. So, that said, but I do think that experience counts, and I think that when you look at somebody who has, I've served in federal healthcare, I've served in foreign service, I've served with NATO, I've served in nonprofits and in local government, and all of those things. And I believe that the stew that makes, the perfect mixture is that I've got the experience that it takes to step into the job right away, to sit in that chair that Spike and I were talking about, and to preside over the deliberations of Senate and say, like I said, there is a new sheriff in town, and you are not going to be pulling the wool over the American people's eyes anymore, because I'm watching you right here, right now.
Okay, Ken, if that's it, we'll move on to Larry.
The most important thing, in my view, is kind of what Ken said, in that, who's been on the trail, to use his words, who has the experience. Well, for this job, this is all about one thing. It's about supporting a candidate on a massive campaign. That's what it's about. Without question, if you're asking for experience, no one running has more experience running a large L campaign. No one. Big L campaign. No one's run a bigger one. Who's running it all, with the exception of Judge Jim Gray. I've run the biggest campaign, except Judge Jim Gray, of a big L campaign, period. Whether that's a size of people who've been on it, over hundreds, money raised, constituents I covered, ground I've covered, no one can match that. Not just that. Again, as I said, I raised $750,000. No one can match that. 65 different 65 different places I've been, 20 different state affiliates that I've raised money for, 10 different candidates I've raised money for. There's no one can do that if that's what you think is important. If you don't think that's important, no worries. How else do you support? You support somebody by being there and helping them out when they fall down. That's what I do for a living. That's what I've been doing for the past 4 years. If you don't think so, you can ask a dozen people who've run for office and were in trouble and said, Larry, I don't want to run. And they called me up and I put them on the phone and I sat with them for an hour on the phone and said, let me show you how you raise money. Let me give you some of my donors. Let me give you some of my advice. Let me give you some of my team so that you can actually grow bigger, badder, stronger. When it comes to support, I don't see anybody who's supported candidates. Again, and I say big L candidates the way I have. I keep doing it. It's what I do. If it is about support, I'm assuming that's what you're saying it is. That's what I'm saying it is. I don't see anybody else who's done all those things and will continue to. And when it comes to the press, who's been in the press more than I have? Who's been in the press talking about Big L? Who defended Gary Johnson 8 times in the press? CBS, RT, CNN. Who's done that? That was me. Who did it when I was in running for governor in 2018? That was me. Who was doing press conferences with local people in New York State? That was me. So if that's what you're looking for, that's the guy that you want. You want the guy you want is me. If you're saying, Larry, it isn't that. I want someone who can push the message better than anybody. I want someone who can push the message and get the left and the right and the middle. I hope I've shown you that I can do that. I can talk to Bernie bros just as well as I can talk to the hard right. I can talk to the left and the middle. I'm the guy who actually says, you know what? Let's find common ground and find a way for you to vote. I'm the one who counts votes. I'm about getting people to vote for me. People say, well, Larry, you didn't win in New York. You're right. I did not win in New York. And I was the only person who ran a 5-person race and still got ballot access. A 5-person race and still got 100,000 votes. A 5-person race and got 103 libertarians elected the next year. If that's what you're looking for, that's what I'm telling you. I'm a big L libertarian, been so since 2012. I'm not going anywhere. I know how to support people. I hope you guys decide that I'm the right guy.
Great. Do you have a website you want to give, Larry?
Gray Sharpe 2020.
Okay, great. And he's still under the limit in case anybody wants to know. Spike, go ahead.
Sure. So before I forget, let me do the same thing. Spike 2020 is the website. My social media on Twitter is @RealSpikeCohen. The Facebook is facebook.com/literally Spike Cohen. Or if you're searching in the Facebook search bar, it's Spike Cohen, your next VP. Folks, I believe the reason that, and as Ken said and Larry said, I think this is not an issue of saying that there's something wrong with Ken or something wrong with Larry or anything like that. The reason I believe that I would be the ideal fit for VP is because I believe that I have demonstrated over the past 3 years my ability to share the libertarian message, a principled, radical, no-nonsense libertarian message outside of traditional libertarian circles. Muddy Waters Media has tens of thousands of followers across social media. We built that on the back of entertaining people and sharing a message of liberty. My shows are markedly different than this debate in that we are primarily doing entertainment with the idea that once we have them in, that we can educate them about the libertarian message. And we brought people to the Libertarian Party because of that. And it's very easy to do. I've been doing this from going to housing projects, college campuses, helping to grow local, state, and campus affiliates, giving a message, talking to individuals, small groups, and large groups of all different sizes to spread the libertarian message. And in a time such as now, I believe that we are in a unique position to be able to share that message and to be able to subvert the media, force them to do our bidding by presenting something that they can't stop paying attention to, and then be able to, yellow pill them into libertarianism by sharing that message. I believe that we have to do that as libertarians. We are not the never Trump conservatives who like weed party. We are not the best parts of the Republicans and Democrats party. We're the Libertarian Party. We have libertarian principles. We have libertarian beliefs, and we need to present that because what the Republicans and the Democrats have put us in is something that that is the reason for the bad situation that we're in now. And I think we're in a unique position to be able to do that. And I believe that my experience with Muddy Waters Media and my experience campaigning puts me in the best position to be able to promote our beliefs to the general public, including a public that often is very, very against these ideas. They've been told from the beginning that self-ownership is bad, or that these things are selfishness and that we just care about ourselves, and disabusing them of that by using the proven sales techniques that I used running a business for over 20 years, or just under 20 years, using the whole feel, felt, found method of explaining to people, listening to what they have to say, and then from their explanation of what their issues are, explaining why our solutions are the best ones for their problem. And again, Spike 2020, @Real Spike Cohen, Spike Cohen, your next VP. I hope I've made my case. I will be going through these comments, questions that were asked that we didn't have a chance to answer, and I will be going through and answering in the comments. And if you have any questions, any other questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to answer it. And I'd like to thank the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus for hosting this event and giving us a chance to compare and contrast each other. and for everyone to steal my idea of the boot in the chair.
So taking it, Spike.
Just took it. Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to pander. I refuse to take this opportunity to pander to anyone. And so in doing so, I just want to say that I do believe taxation is theft, and I am a member of the Mises Caucus, and vote for Spike.
You're just wearing that hat to cover up your haircut.
That is correct. That is correct. I wish if I thought I could have gotten away with it, I would have done it at the beginning.
No,
I'm stealing Ken's thing of a nation of people too.
That was a good one.
So stealing that.
Nation of People was amazing.
Yeah. So stealing that.
Gosh, my hair's even worse now.
One thing I did want to note is that we did invite John McAfee, who's running with Adam Kokesh. He declined when we told him that we're using the StreamYard software that allows us to broadcast up to 5 channels at the same time, and he couldn't get on board with that. So no bad feelings toward him. Best of luck for his campaign and on all the presidential candidates that are running.
You can go to the Sharpe Way YouTube page, and you can then see his interview 2 hours on the Sharpe Way. Please go ahead.
Okay, great.
Shameless, Larry. Shameless.
Or no, let me do it too, because he was on my show on My Fellow Americans back in, I think, November. So be sure to check that out, muddywatersmedia.com.
In case you didn't notice.
Now Ken
All
has
right,
to interview
I'll
him.
get John on the show, okay?
Great. I think Connor, do you know when our presidential forum is? I forgot to print that out.
I want to say next Saturday.
I think it's Saturday. It might be Sunday.
The 9th, I believe.
Watch the Libertarian Mises Caucus page. We'll be promoting it there. Also, if you haven't signed up for our email updates, please do so at takehumanaction.com. That way you can keep up to date on what the Mises Caucus is doing, the breaking news about the National Convention that we'll be developing over the next few days and all that. And if you want to support Mises PAC, you can do that too at takehumanaction.com. I'd like to thank Ken, Spike, and Larry for running a great campaign so far, a clean campaign, and everybody getting along and being respectful of each other. It was really a pleasure. Connor, thanks for feeding me the questions. And thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll see you next weekend on the presidential debate.
Thanks you again.
Thanks, guys.
Peace out, everybody.
Okay.
Y'all take care.